She's somebody I met 2 years ago through another program. And at that time, she was already a director, executive director at Dipalaya. Jaswant Kaur brings a very versatile experience over 18 years, looking everything from compliance, financial management, donor management, fundraising. She currently serves as a vice president at the BITS Alumni Trust. For those of you who follow her on LinkedIn, you will also see a lot of articles that she regularly pens. To kind of start the first session, which is really around the fundamentals of what the social stock exchange is, what are its primary considerations, I will now hand it over to Jaswant to walk you through the next 20 minutes. Any queries that you have, please place them on the chat box. We will be compiling all the questions as FAQs at the end of each session, and you will receive an FAQ document with responses on our mailing list. For those of you who have joined us today, you will be on our mailing list. And for the rest of the logistics, the team will speak about it at the end of the webinar. Over to you, Jaswant.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Vijaya, for that introduction and setting the context of today's session. I feel really privileged to have received this opportunity to speak on one of the most buzzing topics of the development sector, which is the social stock exchange. And I'm really grateful to you and the entire team of Social Lens for inviting me for this introductory session. So before we actually look at what social stock exchange is, let's briefly look at the commercial stock exchange, like the traditional stock exchange, which we have heard a lot about. And I'm sure all of us who are in this room would be quite familiar with what actually a social stock exchange is. And many of you might have already experienced goosebumps as well, when your investment value, changes with the Sensex and, Nifty. So, but what purpose does a stock exchange actually serves for the commercial sector? So, one, it gives the corporates a platform to get themselves listed, trade in their equity shares. Two, it gives an avenue for raising resources through different instruments like equity shares, debentures. It also, gives a platform, a medium of communication with their investors while they disclose a lot of information in the IPO documents or the FPO documents that they upload for raising funds. From plus, there is a mechanism with which these people, the general public, can form an opinion about an organization or a company, and based on which, based on the disclosure requirements and the information that they share, the investors, they are encouraged to invest money. But when it comes to the social sector, we are often bogged down with several questions, like where do we raise funds from? How do we approach people who are having money, like corporates, HNIs, UHNIs? And often, many of us, end up, asking, is there any platform or is there any website where we all can meet them at one place? So is there a way to interact with them? Is there a method where we can showcase, our impact that we have created? So basically, this is the place where, this is the made where social stock exchange actually, comes into picture. So briefly saying, it will basically create a platform for the organizations for the development sector organizations, where they can meet investors and donors, where they can interact with them, raise resources, pitch for their projects through different instruments, and showcase their impact that they have created, or they will be creating through the projects that they are raising funds for. So this is briefly what we will be able to define. This is how I will be able to define the social stock exchange. So what purpose does this social stock exchange, actually serves? As mentioned, as in the case of the commercial stock exchanges, social stock exchange will also ensure, transparency of transactions that happen between the investors, and the donors, and the social enterprises. Plus, it will play the role of matchmaking, as I already mentioned, and also establish, credibility of the social enterprises, because these social enterprises who will be registered on the social stock exchange, they will have to comply with certain eligibility conditions, and also will have to give certain disclosures, which will most probably will help in reducing the trust deficit that we often see or often come across in the development sector. So let's move on to the next slide, please. Yeah, so we'll briefly touch upon the eligibility conditions of the social enterprises. So essentially, there will be two sorts of social enterprises which will be listed on the social stock exchange. One is the non-profit organization, and the other one are the for-profit social enterprises. So you all are very well aware, like for the non-profit organizations, essentially comprises of charitable trusts, formed under the Indian Trust Act, or formed under a relevant, statute by the state governments. Like, few states, they have their own trust acts, like the state of Maharashtra and the state of Rajasthan as well. Then, charitable societies which are formed under Societies Registration Act 1860, and then, companies which are incorporated under Section 8 of the Companies Act 2013, and which also comprises the erstwhile Section 25 of the Companies Act 1956. So these are the basic organizations which will fall under the category of non-profit organizations, while the for-profit social enterprises will be companies incorporated under section other than Section 8, which is general companies or body corporates, and they will be operating for profit. So this is Apart from that, there are certain organizations which have been actually excluded from being participating on the social stock exchange. These are basically the corporate foundations, the political or the religious organizations, the professional or trade associations, infrastructure and housing companies. So they will not be eligible to participate in the social stock exchange. However, certain organizations which are providing affordable housing services, which are participating in the government scheme of affordable housing, they shall be eligible to participate. So all of these organizations which are actually eligible to participate on the social stock exchange will have to prove the primacy of social intent, which we will delve into a little bit detail in the next slide. Please move on to the next slide. Yeah, thank you. If you have looked at the SEBI's framework on social stock exchange, it lists a set of activities which are called the eligible activities. These are basically 16 activities which form the part of the framework. So all the social enterprises who wish to get registered on the social stock exchange will have to at least be actively working on any of these activities. So these 16 activities, we'll briefly touch upon these activities also in the coming slides, basically are very much similar to the ones listed under the Companies Act for CSR funding, and are in also alignment with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So and I'm sure many of the organizations which are present in this room would be actively participating in any one or two or more of the activities which are listed under in the framework. The second condition is that these social enterprises must be working for a target population group or the region which are of priority to either to the center or the state government for development purposes. So this is the second eligibility condition to prove primacy of social intent. The third condition is that these social enterprises should have at least 67% of its activities targeted towards the population group that we are referring in the second point. So there is a method of determining whether a social enterprise is actually spending or actually contributing towards those activities. So it says that these enterprises will have to comply either of the three conditions which are actually highlighted in the red boxes, which says that if during the immediately preceding 3 years, average revenue that comes from these eligible activities aimed at again the target population is 67% of the total revenue of a social enterprise, then it will be proof that the social entity is having primacy of social intent. Second condition, which there is a or, which means any of these three conditions have to be complied by the social enterprises. The second condition is that the average expenditure which is incurred for conducting again the eligible activities for the benefit of the target population should be 67% of the total expenditure. And the third is that average members of the target population should be 67% of the total beneficiaries. So this is how they are going to establish your primacy of social intent. It is much beyond the memorandum and the bylaws that generally societies and companies are having. So just based on the total objectives of the organizations, they are not going to register. They are basically going to see like what kind of investment have you made, or what kind of revenue, what kind of activities have you actually conducted, or what sort of beneficiaries are there in your target population, to establish like these organizations are eligible for getting registered on the social stock exchange. So this slide is actually very important from a registration point of view. Next slide, please. Yeah, so these are the set of eligible activities that we were, actually I was talking about. And I am sure like most of you must be familiar with these activities. So the social enterprises must be working on any one of these activities and to comply with the registration requirements. Like first is like eradicating hunger, poverty, malnutrition, and inequality. Second is promoting healthcare, including mental health care, sanitation, making available safe drinking water, promoting education, employability and livelihoods, promoting gender equality, empowerment of women, LGBTQ and I plus communities, ensuring environmental sustainability, addressing climate change, and so forth, and protection of national heritage, art and culture, training to promote training to promote rural sports, nationally recognized sports, Paralympic sports, Olympic sports, supporting the incubators of social enterprises. Yeah, next slide, please. So I will be just reading out these activities because you can always go back to the framework for getting more details on the eligible criteria activities. And so even like platforms like Give India and Dasra, which strengthen the non-profit ecosystem and fundraising and capacity building will be eligible, will be an eligible activity as well. Then promoting livelihoods for rural and urban poor, including enhancing income of small and marginal farmers, slum area development, affordable housing, and other interventions to build sustainable and resilient cities, disaster management, relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction activities, promotion of financial inclusion, facilitating access to land and property assets for disadvantaged communities, bridging the digital divide in internet and mobile phone access, and going forward to the promoting welfare of migrants and displaced persons. So you must have noticed like all of these activities, majority of them, they are covered under the CSR law, as well as they really form part of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide, please. Yeah, so apart from the conditions that we discussed earlier, These are the basic conditions. I think every non-profit is supposed to comply with. We get you get funds under CSR or work and as a non-profit. So they should have a valid registration as a charitable trust or a charitable society or a Section 8 company at the time of registration with the Social Stock Exchange. They should have a memorandum of association and articles of association, which is basic requirement of an organization, like or trust deed, bylaws, or the constitution. They should have valid registration under the Income Tax Act under section 12A, 12AA, 12AB. And they should have a valid PAN, and with the registration as non-profit, should have valid ATG under the Income Tax Act. And three important conditions which are very important are like they should have at least 3 years old registration. Their annual spending in the last financial year should be at least 50 lakh rupees, and funding which they have received in the last financial year should be at least rupees 10 lakh. So these are the conditions, eligibility criteria for the non-profit organizations. Next slide, please. Okay, so although this will be dealt in much more detail in the upcoming sessions, so the question is that how can these enterprises actually raise funds? Based on the category, that is the non-profit organizations and the for-profit social enterprises, there are different methods and mediums through which they can raise funds. For the non-profit organizations, the most important instrument would be like zero coupon, zero principal instrument. So when we say that zero coupon, zero principal instrument, it means the money has not to be returned back, so it will not have any interest rate as well. But it will have a maturity period. It will be similar to a donation like under CSR. So this will be given for a specified project or an activity which actually falls under the list of eligible activities that we just now looked at. And the maturity period of this zero coupon, zero principal instrument will be same as that of the CSR project. That's what we will get into more details in the coming sessions on this. Then the second donation is through the mutual fund scheme. So and non-profits can also receive donations through mutual fund schemes. And having said that, SEBI can always notify any other method through which the non-profits can raise funds. For the for-profit social enterprises, they can issue equity shares, or they can raise funds through social impact funds, and they can also issue debt securities and debentures. Just like any other for-profit organization, they can raise through a commercial stock exchange. Besides that, SEBI can always notify any other method for the for-profit social enterprises as well for raising funds. Okay. The other key important points that must be kept in mind. One, the social stock exchange is not going to be a separate stock exchange. It's going to be just a small segment which will be catering to the social enterprises and will be part of NSE or BSE. In fact, last Friday, if you have read the news, Bombay Stock Exchange has already been given in principle approval for having this segment of social stock exchange of late. Yeah. And then another aspect we want to touch upon is that even if a social enterprise, they don't want to raise funds, they can still get registered on the social stock exchange. This will add on to the credibility of that social enterprise and will give much more visibility to their work. And another caveat, eligibility condition is that the social enterprises who want to get themselves registered on the social stock exchange, their promoters or directors should not be debarred under any law, or they should not be a willful defaulter, or they should not be a fraudulent borrower or a fugitive economic offender. So these are the basic key points which we have to keep in mind. And that's the I think that's the last slide that I have to deal with. And thank you so much for listening to me patiently. Hope I have, dealt with most of the eligibility conditions for a social enterprise to get registered with the social stock exchange.